friends. So today I'm going to show you how I make my sourdough cinnamon rolls. It's a fairly simple process once you've done it. When I first started making them, I was like, wow, this is like super involved. But now that I've done it a few times, it's fairly straightforward. So what you're gonna need, or what is helpful, is a stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, it's no big deal. It just takes more elbow grease to do. But a big bowl, and then I'm gonna start off by adding a half a cup of my active starter. If you don't know anything about starters, go back to my earlier videos. I show you how to make sourdough starter yourself, or if you know somebody who has sourdough, they can always give you some. When I first started making sourdough, my sister Hannah gave me some, which is super nice, and I've just kind of combined it with all of my starters, and it's fun. All right, so now that I put that in, I'm gonna use 2/3 cup of milk. You can use whole milk. This is raw milk because this is what we have, but you can also use the milk alternative if you are not doing dairy. I have 2 tablespoons of butter, and then I'm using a duck egg. It's 1 egg, but I've used it with a regular chicken egg too, and that works just as well. Duck egg is just really good for baking, and because I have them, I thought, why not use it? So, all right, and then I have 1 teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. I don't know why, but you know the Guardians of the Galaxy moment where they're talking about the Anulax batteries. That's what popped in my head when I was thinking of granulated sugar. Very random, but okay. So now that I have all of this mixed in, I am going to mix it up on my stand mixer, and then I will add the flour. I've mixed up my mixture, and now I'm gonna add 2.5 cups of, this is King Arthur's all-purpose flour. And then we're gonna mix some more. So mine and my stand mixer takes a minute, but you wanna make sure that all of the dough gets scraped into it. So sometimes I'll stop the stand mixer and take like a rubber spatula and just like make sure the dough gets mixed in, but I also sometimes just wait and the stand mixer will get it. If you're doing this by hand, just you're gonna have to oil your elbows, and yeah, so you're gonna want to knead it for a little bit, like make sure it's all mixed in, and then knead it for, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 minutes until you have a good dough that isn't overly sticky or overly dry. So as I'm taking the dough off of my hook, I can see that it's really sticky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some more all-purpose flour, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it in there so that way I can actually like work with the dough a little bit. I don't add a lot, and I just kind of go until it's not as sticky. Sometimes it's stickier than other times. It's weather dependent. It depends on when you're using your starter. I mean, there's multiple different factors. It's not a big deal adding more flour, so no big thing. Okay, so now I have my nice little dough ball in my mixing bowl. I've wetted a dish towel to lay over my dough so that way it doesn't dry out. And if I'm letting this sit for a longer time, so I'll just check it every once in a while, make sure it's still damp. If not, I'll wet it again. I've had in the past where I didn't, and it kind of like the top of my dough was a little dry, so I just picked some of that off. But I try to avoid that because it's better to have it not dry out. So now I'm gonna let it sit for 8 to 12 hours, depending. Like I said, it's not a science. Just when the dough has doubled in size is when I'll be able to use it again. There is, well, I don't know that it's necessarily an option, but in every sourdough recipe that I have ever done, there's always 30 minutes after you've mixed it, they say to stretch your dough. So basically just going back into your bowl, taking one side, taking a quarter of it, pressing it towards the middle, spinning your bowl, doing another quarter, so on and so forth until you've made it all the way around. It's to help, you know, get the dough active, because this 30 minutes is to like let it rest and then get it active and all that good stuff. I'll be honest with you, I have almost never done that. I maybe started doing that when I first started making bread, but I almost always forget, and I've never had a problem with my dough. I just knead it pretty well before I let it rest, but yeah, I almost never do that. But you're welcome to, after 30 minutes, come back and stretch it. It helps, I think, like integrate salt or something. I'm a rogue sourdough baker. I don't I don't play by the rules. Anyway, so we're gonna let this rise. I'm just gonna go set this back on my stand mixer so it's out of the way, but that is the first part of the process. And we're back, and we're ready. I have my dough. It has been sitting. So I let it rise yesterday, and then I put it in the fridge overnight because I wasn't doing this part last night. So I grabbed it out of the fridge earlier this morning and let the dough warm up to like room temperature. Just because it's easier to work with than if it's really cold. You'll find that with any dough, that especially if you need to roll it out, it's easier when it's not frigid. The hands of Elsa. Anyway, so I was letting this sit out for a second, so that way I can roll it out, but before I roll it out and actually shape it like the cinnamon rolls, I need to make the cinnamon sugar filling. So I will show you how to do that. Okay, so to make the cinnamon sugar filling, we're gonna use a whole stick of butter, softened, and then we're gonna use half a cup of sugar. I use granulated sugar, but any kind of sugar will work. And then I use 3 teaspoons of cinnamon. A tablespoon of flour. And then that's it. And then I'm gonna mix it up on my stand mixer, and then I'll be good to go to roll out my dough. And apparently my youngest is poopy. Don't you love that? Okay, so I have this all mixed up, and I have my youngest and his poop trail cleaned. Yes, you heard me. It was a poop trail, and it was Anyway, so I mixed it up, and what I didn't tell you, or what isn't necessarily in the recipe that I do with this, is I add just like a splash of milk, just because I feel like it makes the filling go farther, like, and it spreads easier. I've done it both ways. I feel like adding a splash of milk, whatever of your choosing, stretches it a little bit further, because otherwise I feel like it goes on drier. Just my experience. But anyway, now that I have that, I am going to roll out the dough so that way we can put this cinnamon sugar filling on. All right, one thing I didn't really mention was how big you should make it. I will link the recipe that I'm using in the show notes, but I I just make it pretty much as big as my cutting board. In the recipe, it has you doing these like specific dimensions, measuring out with a ruler, and I read that the first time and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not about to get a ruler out to measure dough for cinnamon rolls that I'm going to eat. I'm not worried about them being that pretty or that perfectly symmetrical or even just my thing though. Like if that's you, awesome. Those will be in the original recipe and I'll link that in the description. So now that I have that, we got our cinnamon sugar, and then we're just gonna spread it out on the dough. I would leave a little room on the edge, and you should have something kind of like this. Okay, so now is the semi-tricky part. I don't know. That's my kind of dance, but so we're gonna take it at the long edge. I had to read this a couple times in the recipe to like get what they were saying, because that doesn't always compute. So sometimes it's helpful to see someone do it. So I'm starting at the long edge, and I'm gonna roll it, and I'm gonna go slow because you want it to be tight. Otherwise, it's gonna look all deformed, and it's not gonna form the way you want it to. So I'm just gonna roll this all the way down. You know, take your time with this step. You don't have to do it in one go. If you need to unroll it and redo it, that's fine too. Oh, I should have put more flour down on this. It's sticking. All right, and when you get to the end, it'll be kind of like rolled up like this. You want the seam side down. So the part where the dough meets, you want that to be on the bottom. All right, then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in through with a serrated knife and kind of mark where I want to cut each one of my rolls. They're about an inch or two. You should be able to get about 10 to 12 cinnamon rolls per batch, but it also depends on how big you make them, I guess, or want them. So I did 10. So now that I've marked it and it kind of looks like a strudel, I'm gonna go back through and cut them all. And then I will show you what I'm gonna put it in. Okay, so what I use is just a glass pie dish. If you have one of those spring loaded pans, those would probably be easier. I'm just gonna tear off some parchment paper. And what I do, I'm gonna set this in here, but I'm gonna crumple it up because it will stay better. And then I will just fill this in with my cinnamon rolls. Okay, so I have my cinnamon rolls in the dish. What I'm gonna do now is I just started my oven, so it's gonna preheat to 350, and then you're gonna bake these for about 35-40 minutes, or whenever the tops of them start to get slightly golden. In my oven, it takes about 35 minutes. You don't want to take them out before then, because some of the issues I've had in the past is the middle doesn't bake completely, so you want that to bake completely. So make sure you want them to be golden on the top. That's a good indication that they are cooked all the way. And then because you have so much butter in here, what I've noticed is when you're cooking, you're gonna get some of that butter and you're gonna see that in your dish. Don't freak out. When you take it out and let them cool, the butter is gonna reabsorb. I know the first time I was like, wait, did I do something wrong? You didn't. So if you take that out and you see some like lots of butter, it's because you have a lot of butter in the recipe and it's melted and it's gonna reabsorb. So anyway, don't freak out. But I've preheated my oven, so I am gonna wait for that to heat, put my cinnamon rolls in, and then I will come back and show you how we're gonna make a wonderful glaze for this. So while that is baking, we're gonna make the glaze to go on top once the cinnamons have cooled. All right, so what you're gonna need for this is about 2 tablespoons of softened butter. Yes, if you've noticed, we've used a crap ton of butter in this recipe because this recipe just loves butter. About a 1/3 cup of softened cream cheese, 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk, but we're gonna add that last. And then we're gonna add about a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Add more of it if you really like really sweet. So we're gonna do that. And we're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of milk. I'm using raw milk, but you can use whole milk, you can use almond milk, you can use whatever milk you prefer. That's what you should use. All right, now we're gonna mixy on our stand mixer and it'll be good to go. Okay, so I just pulled the cinnamon rolls out of the oven. I think I might have made the cinnamon filling a tad just a titch too runny with the milk, but I don't think that's that big of a deal that it kind of splashed over the rest of them. So I just pulled them out. I'm gonna let them cool half an hour or so, and then I'm gonna put the icing that I made earlier on top of it, and then they are best to enjoy fresh. So enjoy. What time is it?
Cinnamon roll time.
Cinnamon roll time. And we have the finished product. What do you think, Luca? Does it smell good?
Okay.